Okay, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Murtaugh. I'm from Southeast Community College. I am here with my teammate, Dana Myers, who is also in the Workforce Solutions Division here at SCC, and then our IT guru, Luke, who's in the back. So thank you for coming. We hope you'll find this day of information beneficial. We hope you'll find some new activities and new programs that you can become a part of and learn how they work. Like I said, we do have a mask mandate in place if you have a critter and not from here, so we just ask that you keep those on for us if possible. That'd be great. Thank you very much. Bathrooms are out the door and down this hallway. Vending machines are out that way, so we have pop snacks. They take credit cards. Hey. So if you need to pay that way, feel free. If at any time you have any questions, just put your hand up. This is kind of going to be a loose format. So Elliot is going to be our first presenter today, and then we do have a panel member here to talk to us later after Elliot's presentation from GSK to talk to us about how he's currently using registered apprenticeships and how he went through that process and how the process is going for him. So I am going to hand this over to Elliot Kane. He's the Reemployment Program Coordinator here. Just as a reminder as well, we have folks zooming in from our other learning centers. SCC has a service area of 15 counties, so we've also invited them, so we may be getting questions in from them as well via the Zoom format. So I will try to let you know if we have somebody who has a question or we monitoring the chat. But anyway, without further ado, I hand it over to Elliot. Thank you, sir. It's up to you.
Okay. We're good. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Elliot Kane, and I'm the Program Coordinator for Registered Apprenticeships with the Nebraska Department of Labor, and that's what I'm here to talk to you today about. I have a little PowerPoint here. It's only about 8 or 9 slides, so don't despair. This is not a death by PowerPoint by any stretch, but it does help me unpack what a registered apprenticeship is, because in Nebraska, it's not quite as prevalent as some of our Midwestern peers. So I always like to start by defining what a registered apprenticeship is. I'm having a little trouble with the clicker here. Sorry. It worked 10 minutes ago. So. There we go. Okay, so I always like to unpack and start with start by defining what a registered apprenticeship is. And in short, it is a rigorous employment training program that's registered with the U.S. Department of Labor. Simple enough, but there's a little more to it that I'll dive into here in a second. The main point of having a registered apprenticeship program is that it helps employers improve their retention and productivity, and it helps widen the hiring pool of candidates that an employer can select from for a specific occupation. So with any registered apprenticeship, there's 5 main components that go into it. The first one being that it's employer driven. We have to have employers for this stuff to go anywhere, and employers really are in the driver's seat with registered apprenticeship programs. Some folks are under the impression that it's the U.S. Department of Labor coming in and telling you what to do. Some folks are under the impression it's the State Department of Labor coming in and telling you how to do things, and that's really not the case. Registered apprenticeships are meant to address employer needs, concerns, and pain points as it pertains to hiring and training their workforce. Second component with any registered apprenticeship is structured on-the-job training, and that's usually what most folks think of when they hear the word apprenticeship, is a more experienced employee showing a newer employee what to do. And that's really the heart of registered apprenticeships. When an employer has a registered apprenticeship, it is registered for a specific occupation. And when they hire an apprentice, that apprentice gets paired with a mentor for that one-to-one on-the-job learning. And I always emphasize that mentors will make or break your program. You have to have that buy-in at every level of a business for a registered apprenticeship to really thrive. Third component is related technical instruction. And I mentioned a second ago that when an employer has a registered apprenticeship program, it is registered for a specific occupation. Depending on what that occupation is, there is a certain number of correlating contact hours for related technical instruction. Those hours can come from community college courses, it can come from high school courses, it can come from internal trainings that maybe a business already does, it can come from online courses. There's really a litany of sources that we can, I hate to say this, kind of Frankenstein those hours together to meet that need. But that's really the duality of registered apprenticeships, is the apprentice is getting the on-the-job instruction and then the classroom instruction as well. Fourth component for any registered apprenticeship is a wage increase. There has to be one pay raise built into the apprenticeship program for that apprentice. And when I meet with employers individually, this is the point where I really drive home that apprenticeship is employment. This is not an internship program. This is not an on-the-job learning experience. They're not getting paid in experience. They are a contributing team member. They are contributing to the mission of your business. They're not there to pick up coffee and dry clean. If it's a welding apprenticeship, they're there to weld. If it's a CNA apprenticeship, they're there to learn that. So I really try to drive that home, because in Nebraska, like I started off with, apprenticeship is not quite as prevalent as it is in some of our Midwestern peer states like Iowa, Wisconsin, Colorado. So folks kind of use apprenticeship and internship kind of interchangeably, and that's part of what I try to work on, is just kind of dispelling some of those misconceptions. Fifth component is when an apprentice completes the registered apprenticeship program, they receive an occupational credential. That credential is issued by the U.S. Department of Labor, and it certifies that the apprentice completed the program, and it is also a credential that the apprentice can take with them should they move on to a different employer or to a different state. It's valid in all 50 states. And really the teeth of the credential is that the standards that back up that specific credential for that specific occupation are industry approved. And what I mean by that is, when the U.S. Department of Labor registers a new occupation, they farm out the standards for their credential for that occupation to 10 employers nationwide, 10 employers locally, and they say, hey, these are the standards that are backing up our credential. Is this valid? Is this competitive? Is this up to date? So it's when that apprentice receives that credential, it's not just a diploma mill rubber stamp, from the feds saying, yep, John Q. apprentice is qualified to be doing XYZ job. It's the industry that is saying, yes, John Q. apprentice is qualified to be doing that job. So, all that said, one thing I also try to emphasize here is what my role is. I'm with the Nebraska Department of Labor, and for this specific program, there's a lot of crossover between the U.S. Department of Labor and the State Department of Labor. So I always try to define what I do and what I have control over. I am essentially the liaison between employers and the U.S. Department of Labor. I'm effectively the boots on the ground for the feds to do things like this and get the word out about apprenticeship and to help employers develop programs. And I help facilitate that program development. Now, how a program is developed is, and I give a very similar pitch to what you all just heard to an employer, and they say, Elliot, that sounds great, let's move forward. I say, great, the first thing we do is determine an occupation. That's the jumping off point, is we have to find a specific occupation that this program is going to be registered for. Some folks are under the impression you can kind of, I said it again, Frankenstein an occupation together. We want one part this and one part this and one part that. Doesn't really work like that. It has to be for a specific occupation. There are about 1,500 apprenticeable occupations out there, so chances are, if you have a unique occupation at your business, chances are it is probably apprenticeable. I start with that. Usually employers know which occupation they want to start with. If they don't, I ask these three questions. Which occupation do you have where you just cannot find anybody with a pulse to fill that position? Or which occupation do you have where maybe you can hire folks okay, but for whatever reason they're just not staying in that position? Or the third one, which occupation do you have where maybe you're staffed okay at the moment, but in the next 5, 10, 15 years you're going to be seeing a lot of institutional knowledge walk out the door with retirements? Usually one of those three occupations hits and they say, oh yeah, it's this one, or oh, it's this one. So once we determine that, we then select what's called a work process schedule. A work process schedule is essentially a rubric of what the apprentice is going to be doing every day on the job when they show up 9 to 5. The work process schedule is what the apprentice learns with their mentor for that one-to-one on-the-job learning. It outlines everything they do from 9 to 5. Those come in 3 formats: time-based, competency-based, and then a hybrid of either one. For each occupation, there's usually multiple ones to select from because obviously not everybody does everything the exact same way across the board. And the U.S. Department of Labor does have some leeway in modifying those work process schedules if need be. The go-to example that our USDOL state director always goes to is for welding. There's almost always a section for welders that includes underwater welding. Not a ton of that in Nebraska, so that's something we can take out of there. So that's just an example. But once we determine that work process schedule, that then helps us determine where we go with the related technical instruction. Depending on how many hours, or I should say how many years of a program that work process schedule is, if it's a 2-year program, 3-year program, 4-year, etc., that determines the number of hours for that related instruction. For that related instruction, I usually ask employers, what are you doing already? What do you already have in place? Because it's pretty common for employers to say, oh yeah, we make sure everybody gets certified in this, or we have these courses, these online courses that everybody has to complete, their first 6 weeks or what have you. So if they need to go outside of that, we then look at, like I said, area community colleges, online courses, online trainings, whatever we can to get those hours for that specific occupation. After that, we gather a little more information from the employer that the U.S. Department of Labor needs. Little things like your federal EIN number, your selection procedures, your hiring criteria, point of contact, things like that. We take all of that information, the work process schedule, the related instruction, and those little bits of information, and we compile it into a document called the Standards of Apprenticeship. That is essentially the registered apprenticeship program, but on paper. We then get signatures from all parties involved, submit it to the feds, and the feds register it, and you have a registered apprenticeship program. From there, I always try to make sure that the business is connected with an area Department of Labor Career Center. It's an approach that we're trying to take to make sure that we're being holistic and we're making sure that that businesses are getting every need met. Because a lot of times they have things they need outside of apprenticeship stuff. So we want to make sure that they're getting access to everything that we have available to them, and not just saying, hey, here's your registered apprenticeship program, goodbye forever, we'll never talk again. We want to keep those relationships stable. It's bugging out on me again, sorry. Try it out. There we go. So this slide is a new slide. I usually do not go here when doing presentations like this because I've already given you a fire hose of information and it's a little tough to digest. But this slide I think is important because it's kind of representative of an initiative that the Nebraska Department of Labor has been taking lately. So there's different types of programs out there. And this first one that I have mentioned up here is called a group program. So a group program is where one entity registers, has a registered apprenticeship program. They are kind of the owners of that. And then they can have multiple employers sign on to those standards. So an example of that would be like Central Community College. They recently became a registered apprenticeship sponsor. They have, I believe, 2 occupations at the moment. I know they have more in the works, but I think they have 2 occupations available right now. And what they can do is go out to employers and advertise that and say, hey, we have this registered apprenticeship program for XYZ occupation. And the employers can review the standards of that registered apprenticeship program and say, oh yeah, this meets our needs, we need this. And what that employer does is then sign on. It's a very concise way to do things because otherwise we would be creating multiple programs that are pretty much exactly the same. So it's a way to have develop one program and have 10, 15, 20 employers sign on for the same thing, instead of going out and creating 10, 15 individual programs. So again, I hope I haven't lost you. I'm kind of getting in the weeds with some of this stuff, but that brings up what's called a single program. Single program is one employer, one program. It's Frank's Automotive, and that's his program, and nobody else is a part of it. There's also joint and non-joint programs. Joint means union, non-joint means non-union. When I meet with employers, that's one of the first questions I ask: Are you a union employer? It's not good, bad, or indifferent. There's something about collective bargaining that if they are a union shop, I stop right there and I send them directly to the feds. It doesn't determine whether you can or cannot have a registered apprenticeship program. It just kind of determines my involvement with it. So these are some of the benefits to having a registered apprenticeship program. Employers in Nebraska have seen about an 87% retention rate 3 years post-apprenticeship completion. Most apprenticeships last 2, 3, 4 years, so employers in Nebraska are seeing about 3 years tacked on to that. The national average is usually in the mid-90s, and since apprenticeship is kind of new to Nebraska, I think that's why we're kind of hovering in the 80s a little bit, but as we're getting rolling, we want to see that number go up. Employers also see about $1.47 return for every dollar invested into their registered apprenticeship program. When I meet with employers individually, I really try to emphasize that an apprenticeship program is an investment in every sense of the word. You are putting money into this. You are investing in your workforce. I try to be as upfront about that as possible. It's also a proven and effective model. Registered apprenticeships have been around for centuries, and there's a reason for that. It works. I meet with a lot of employers all throughout the state, and a lot of them are waiting for that perfect unicorn candidate to walk through the door that has all the perfect qualifications and all the training and all the experience, and they're just waiting for them. And I'm kind of like, instead of waiting for that person to walk through the door, why don't you create that person? Having a registered apprenticeship program can help make you eligible for various grant opportunities at the state and federal level. It's a great way to establish a pipeline, especially if you partner with an area high school or an area community college or any kind of workforce organization. It's a great way to always have a pool of folks to pull from. And a registered apprenticeship is also GI Bill approved. So talk about establishing a pipeline. You get that registered apprenticeship program going, and then you get a GI Bill approved, and you can advertise to veterans and say, hey, come use your GI Bill and go through our registered apprenticeship program. We have a career for you. These are some metrics. Whenever I do these, folks are always interested in metrics, so I always try to include some. I will say these are approximate. This stuff changes every day. The U.S. Department of Labor is kind of the keepers of the guard with some of this information. So I don't always have direct, down to the minute, up-to-date numbers for it, but we usually have around 120 or so programs throughout the state. But to piggyback on that, we have around over 150 partner employers. A partner employer is, like I mentioned before in this slide here with the group. Partner employers are the ones who signed on. They don't have a program themselves, but they're signed on. They're signed on to a program. At any given moment in the state, there's about 3,500 apprentices out there working. And this isn't a metric, but I think it's important to note that the industries and occupations that for our registered apprenticeships in Nebraska, some folks kind of, they hear apprenticeship and they're like, oh yeah, electricians, oh yeah, plumbers. And it's actually a lot more than that. There is obviously the constructions and the utilities, but there's also welding stuff, there's also automotive stuff, there's also culinary stuff, there's industrial manufacturing, there's IT, there's all kinds of stuff out there. Like I said, there's 1,500 apprenticeable occupations, so chances are if you have it, it is likely apprenticeable. This email address here is the apprenticeship inbox for the Nebraska Department of Labor. If you want to jot that down, I'll give you a second to do that. If you'd like to reach out to me after today, if you want to hear more about apprenticeships, if you want to set up an individual meeting, this is the best way to go about it. Email me right here.
Can you share this PowerPoint with us?
will check on that. I know Department of Labor sometimes is a little guarded on just handing stuff out, so I can double check on that.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
So we work with people trying to find jobs. Is there a way to find out which companies already are?
It's a great question.
Program?
Great question. If anybody didn't hear that, he's asking if there's a way to see what businesses are posting apprenticeship openings. The best resource at the moment is the website apprenticeship.gov. That is a U.S. Department of Labor labor exchange website only for apprenticeship openings. We have some things in works, with what we want to do at the state level, but at the moment, that's the best route, because that's the thing with some of this stuff is there has to be an opening, for it. It's great to talk about all the good things it does, but if there's no opening at Frank's Automotive, that doesn't always help some of the job seekers. So that would be the best route.
Perfect. Thank you.
You mentioned the grant opportunities. Do you have any more information on just what those typically consist of, or the process for getting those?
I don't. I have some Department of Labor colleagues, and I think one of them will be talking a little later here about a specific grant. I generally don't go into that territory without someone there alongside, just because I don't want to give out incorrect information. And then, it becomes gospel, and well, Elliot said this. If you'd like to hear more, you can jot down my email and send me an email, and I could set up something individually, so you can hear more from people who are more knowledgeable about those than I am.
Any other questions for Elliot? Let's see on our chat there.
So I have a couple more questions. So, you gave us the email address. Is there any, website we can kind of look around on to see, what the state is fit for us?
The NDOL website does have some apprenticeship information on it. It's not super comprehensive, just because sometimes you kind of need somebody there to kind of walk you through it, because if it doesn't make a lot of sense to the person off the street, it's not super helpful. But the NDOL website does have some apprenticeship stuff on there.
Elliot, I know we've got a bit of time before Patrick comes to answer some questions. Have you worked with Patrick directly for his apprenticeship at GSK?
I think that one was established prior to me coming aboard.
Okay, would you be able to give us an example or walk us through a current apprenticeship that you had, that you just started or that you're working with, or kind of give an example of one?
Sure. So I'll start with Central Community College. That's one that's been getting a lot of attention lately. So Central Community College started they have an electrician apprenticeship program, and they have a welding apprenticeship program. I believe it's for combination welder. The way we started that is Central has several employers that they work with, and there was a couple that were pretty interested in it, and they wanted to hear more. And so what we do is we say, okay, this is the occupation, and we always start with, is there a need for this specific occupation? If there is no need for a specific occupation, I know there is a taxidermist apprenticeship program out there, not a ton of demand, for that specific occupation. So we always start with where is the need, where is the energy? And we met with a couple businesses with Central Community College, and we go over the work process schedule. I don't always remember stuff off the top of my head, but I think it was a 6,000 hour program, which 6,000 hours broken down by increments of 2,000 hours is considered a 3-year program. And so 3 years, there needs to be 144 contact hours for that classroom learning for each year that an apprenticeship program lasts. So for 3 years, it's I believe it's 432, we call them classroom contact hours. Doesn't just mean that the apprentice is sitting, in a chair like this, staring at a whiteboard. It can be lab stuff, it can be homework, it can be reading, it can be all those things. So once we determined that work process schedule for that business, we then determine what courses that they need. That's a collaborative effort with the business. It's kind of buffet style, so to speak. They say, this is what we have available. And I'm getting these all wrong, welding 101, welding 102, welding 103. I know that's not the name of them, but that's what I'm going with at the moment. And they say, oh yeah, we need this. Oh yeah, this would be great. This would be good too. And businesses do have some leeway there too. And they can include courses that do not always, aren't always considered, would be courses that you wouldn't really think of when you think of a welding apprenticeship program. For example, a lot of businesses, when they work with an area high school, they include a finance course, because a lot of these people that are getting into these programs, this is the most money they've ever made in their life. Especially if you're working with area high schools, you got kids making upwards $15, $20 an hour. That's not what I was making when I was working at the mall back in the day. So they get a finance course in there so that folks can learn how to manage money and what it means to have a savings account, what an interest rate is, and things like that. So employers can include courses like that to kind of shore up all parts of their apprentices' experience in the program. Once those courses get selected, and Central maybe not be the best example, but it was the one that just came to me off the top of my head. Once that employer feels good with where things are with Central, they sign on to it with one document. That's the beauty of those group programs. Is for employers, all they have to do is sign one page. That's it. The standards of apprenticeship that are the entire program on paper, that can be 10, 15, 20, 30 pages long, and that's a lot of information to go over and make sure every I's dotted and T's crossed. So for those group programs, we really like those because it makes it easy for the employer to say, hey, review this. Does it meet your needs? It does. You want to be a part of it? Sign this one-page document. That's all you got to do. And they become that partnering employer.
What does the one-page document hold into?
It just says that they are a partnering employer. They will agree to there's federal regulation stuff in it that employers are already doing.
Okay.
Like fair wages, equal employment opportunity.
Yeah.
Forgive me,
Yeah.
top of my head, but it's just really basic stuff. Wages, we will pay X wage and get X raise at this time. So
Gotcha.
very basic stuff.
What happens if the apprentice doesn't work out?
That's up to the business. An apprentice is an employee, and if they're showing up late or they're on their phone or they're goofing around, fire them. It's normal hire fire process. You post the position, they have to apply, they have to interview, they jump through all the hoops that a normal employee would. But yeah, if it's not working out, and you got to cut them loose, that's up to the business.
I know you may not have the exact numbers, and that's okay. From your experiences, you got a 16-year-old, typically a junior, you got a 17-year-old, typically a senior, they're going to be 18 pretty soon, and you got somebody that's actually out of high school to the program. Are there any significant numbers you've seen success for, a 16-year-old making through versus 17-year-old versus, soon to be 18? We've had a little bit of program with that, where, as you know, with OPS right now, setting
Right.
up. We had some Council Bluffs, and we weren't at 87%, but that way. And to answer your question, yes, we let this person go. It's a TITS violation. It was just like the other employee. Their employment was terminated, and it was over with.
I don't have any real metrics to go off of for that.
Just from companies you've worked with before to see.
In my experience, the youth is actually rather successful Grand Island Career Pathways in Grand Island, they work with several businesses in the Grand Island area, and they love it up there. And I think it really, it speaks to the people or the businesses that have implemented the registered apprenticeship programs and been a part of it. They really embrace it, and they really put a lot of thought and effort and consideration into it and into the hiring program. And when when there is an apprenticeship program, it doesn't have to be 10, 15 people all at once. It can be 1 or 2, and when you get that into the high schools, it can become very competitive, and it can I don't want to say cutthroat. That's a little too strong a word, but yeah, those kids really get exposed to a specific industry or occupation, and they see the pathway for them. They say, yeah, this can be a lifelong thing for me. Yeah.
Can you explain the difference between pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship?
Sure, definitely. So, question was the difference between pre-apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship. So, quality pre-apprenticeship it's kind of a feeder into an established registered apprenticeship program. So, in order to have a pre-apprenticeship program, you have to have a registered apprenticeship program. That's where you start. A quality pre-apprenticeship program is a way to get folks exposed to a specific business and their occupation and their program without there really being anything on the line. For a quality pre-apprenticeship program, participants are not employees. There's no W-2 or anything like that. They're not getting paid. They're not on the job site. But it's a way to get folks exposed to a specific industry or occupation through a series of courses or trainings or whatever the business wants. That's kind of the beauty of a quality pre-apprenticeship program, is it's not employment, there's not as much I don't say red tape, but there's not as much regulation with it as there is with a registered apprenticeship program. An example of one would be, let's say there's a welding registered apprenticeship program for a business, and maybe for whatever reason they're hiring apprentices, and for every 5 that they hire, only 1 is working. And they say, okay, let's have a quality pre-apprenticeship program. And what that quality pre-apprenticeship program would be is, let's say they want them to go through an OSHA training, and they want a work site safety training and a blueprint, reading blueprint course. They could have those 3 courses, and then there has to be one hands-on component connected to it. That can be, a simulator, or that could be, something low stakes. That probably wasn't a great example, going with the welding one, where obviously a lot of things can go haywire with that. But there does have to be a hands-on component for that specific occupation. And when somebody goes through that, it doesn't guarantee them anything. But when there's an opening for that established program that is connected to, they can put on their application or on their resume, I completed Frank's Automotive's quality pre-apprenticeship program. And that, what that does is it obviously catches the eye of the person reviewing the application and say, oh, they completed this. Oh, they kind of already know what to expect. They kind of already know what this is going to be about. And it helps facilitate that direct entry. Depending on the courses and that go into it, that apprentice could be given credit for prior experience. So maybe let's say they complete a course in the quality pre-apprenticeship training, but it's already in the established program. They could get credit for that, and that's one thing they don't end up having to do once they're in the program. Doesn't guarantee anything, but the idea behind it is that it helps prevent your program from being kind of a washout program. So, it's a good question. Not a lot of people ask about quality pre-apprenticeship, so it's a good topic. Yeah?
So with the GI Bill, since you said it was GI Bill approved, so GI Bill is essentially financial aid. So since it's employment, how does that tie in?
That's a great question. I would have to defer to the feds on that, because getting that GI Bill approved is not part of our process. It's part of what the feds do, so I'm sorry, I don't know.
So just to add on to that, if an organization did add a registered apprenticeship, they would have to go through the steps on getting that program
Correct.
for GI.
Correct. It isn't automatic, but it makes you automatically eligible to have it. So yeah, There's a couple steps, off the top of my head, I don't know what it is, but that's why I work directly with our state director, USDOL state director. His name's Jim Whiteman. He is the top dog for apprenticeship in Nebraska. Everything we do gets filtered up to Jim.
Have you run into any issues with age requirements or limits or anything for different programs? Or how does that work?
Really, the only thing with that would be if it's if there's like an insurance thing for that specific business and they can't have somebody that's under 18 doing, like with construction stuff, every once in a while, I meet with a construction employer and they're interested in hearing about, a youth registered apprenticeship, and it's like, well, you can't have a 16-year-old doing a lot of these tasks, and it doesn't come up a ton. One kind of unique one, there was a bank one, and they're handling sensitive information in the way that that they said we can't have 17-year-olds with access to all these people's information. So there's a couple things like that, but it's generally not a big concern. Whatever the business wants. It could be 50 cents, it could be $1, it could be a nickel for every 30 days. It's up to them. It just has to be higher than when they started. We do encourage businesses to be as competitive as they can be. With that, it's a little difficult if it's they want to start at minimum wage, and if they want this to be a long-term career path for their apprentices. Minimum wage, it's got to be. We do encourage them to make it a little more attractive, versus they can get paid more than that at Walmart, and be a cashier, whatever. So.
A question we get a lot about apprenticeships from employers is, it seems laborious on their end. Are there things that they have to do extra during the year while they have that apprentice? Is there extra reporting or extra information they have to submit somewhere? What is that?
That's good. That's a great question. I would say the most labor-intensive part of it is just getting it developed. Then once it's developed, it's really pretty simple. When they do have a registered apprenticeship program, they get an account on a website that's called Rapids. That is like a registered apprenticeship something. It's a federal Department of Labor website, and that Rapids website is where that employer enters all the information about their apprentices when they complete tasks and move on and they're moving forward in the program. It's very basic, it's very simple. Our state director, Jim Whiteman, he's the go-to person for that since it's a federal website. But it's very basic, it's very user-friendly, and it's all done online so that there's not file cabinets full of paperwork and information. It's all done online, and it's very basic.
So the tasks, would the employer enter the task in there, or is that
Yep.
something that's auto-populated from your apprenticeship application?
I don't know exactly how it looks and how it functions directly, just because we don't have access to it. It's kind of guarded, so to speak,
Gotcha.
between sponsor and the feds. But yeah, it's basic. Johnny completed this task, or Johnny learned this skill, whatever. That's just, it's a way to keep track of folks. Like, you mean like continuing education hours, kind of like?
So, like in our company, if we send you to school for a work-based thing, we typically require you to stay 6 months after work.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
So do you see that, is that something that we can easily say you and your credentials, we'd like you to stay for like at least 6 months?
Correct.
Or a year, whatever.
Employers have that right, you can do that. Yeah, if we're gonna pay for you to go, some of the RTI is equivalent to, some of the related instruction for programs is the equivalent to an associate's degree, or more, or higher, or less. And some say, yeah, if we're gonna pay for you to go through this, you're gonna stick around for a while. So that can be built into it, for sure. It doesn't have to be, but employers have that right if they'd like to do that. Yeah, that's a good question.
How long does a normal, or what's the average length of an apprenticeship?
About 3 years. It really, a lot of answers for this stuff is it depends, but I see about 6,000 hours or 3 years the most frequently. There's some that are 5 years, some that are 6 years. It just kind of depends on what we're doing. But in Nebraska right now, it's about 3 years.
And how many applications or requests do you get in a year to do them? Is there,
It's a good question. It's
does everybody get chosen? Does it-
well, I do my best to meet with everybody as quick as I can. I came on in March of 2019, and there was 2 of us, and then 6 months later after 6 months go by and it's just me. So if you asked me that question in February of 2020, I would have said, I'm getting calls every 10 seconds. Then with COVID, it obviously became much quieter. I'd say I probably get 1 a week from a business right now. It's much steadier than it has been. Last summer was pretty quiet, but most things were at the time. But I was, the summer months tend to be a little busier than, November through March. That things kind of quiet down a little bit then. But yeah, I do my best to get to everybody as quick as I can. There's only 1 of me. We get compared to our Midwestern peers a lot, and Wisconsin has over 40 people at the state level that work on apprenticeship. Iowa has, I think, 12. Nebraska, you got me. So I'm doing the best I can, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of changes and stuff. So I'm trying to roll with the punches, but it's good.
Elliot, can you just, for me, I know you touched on this, and I apologize, I wasn't focusing on that.
That's right.
So, when you had mentioned an organization, so just so I know, an organization can establish an apprenticeship internally, right? So they can build a curriculum, they can do it all, they can just manage it on their own internally. Or they can partner with a community college, and those two would work together to establish this whole thing. Is that, so it would be one or the other?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's unlikely that a business is going to create a program that other businesses are going to sign on to. It's not unheard of. It just, that was I'm sure maybe some of you heard about the IRAP initiative that was from a few years ago. That's kind of what it was. It was like, best example I can think of off the top of my head, let's say Anderson Ford wanted to create an automotive tech. They're the business, they can own the standards, they own all the training. They could have had Duteau Chevrolet and Sid Dillon and all these other similar businesses sign on to it. They can do it that way. It's unlikely, because why would I want to take on all that extra work for these businesses that I'm in competition with? So you see those group programs most frequently with like an education, like a high school or a community college, where there's not that quote unquote competition, so to speak, and it's just easier for it to kind of function that way. So yes, there's it's called a single program. That's just one business with a set of standards for a specific, 1, 2, 3, however many occupations they want to have. Or it can be something like Central Community College, where they have a set of standards for an occupation, and every area welding business can sign on to that and be a part of that. I know I hope it's not confusing. I don't want to lose anybody, because I can get into the weeds with some of this stuff. I talk about it all day, every day, so up here it makes sense, but as it's coming out, I'm like, I hope it makes sense to them too.
So the most popular approach then is really through like a community college establishing an apprenticeship for an occupation.
That would be the best example for something
Okay.
like that, yeah.
Now, has it happened where an organization might like partner with a community college just for their program? Is that
Sure.
possible? So
Sure.
that's possible too. It's still
There-
be just a greater investment for that organization.
Yes, there is.
To do it on their own.
I know that there's community colleges, I try not to give out names if they're not, directly involved, but I know that there's some in Nebraska that, there's several businesses that use their courses there, and they're part of it, but the community college just doesn't have any official involvement in it, they're just using their courses.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions for Elliot, I think we're just gonna take a few minutes for a break, give you guys a minute to stretch or use any facilities we may have before our guest panelist comes, so thank you.